Barbara, you first here. Where does the Trump administration stand legally here? Because Trump has mobilized the National Guard without a request from the state's governor. And that is the first time that's happened since 1965. There is concern over violating the Posse Comitatus Act. So does the president have the authority to do what he's doing?
Yes, Alex, the president does have the power to send the military to call up the National Guard in a case of civil unrest, as long as they're not engaging in traditional law enforcement duties. As you mentioned, the Posse Comitatus Act forbids the military from working as a police department. But they can serve in a support role if they are there to observe, if they are there as a show of force, if they are there in case the president does need to invoke the Insurrection Act. If things get out of hand, they are on the ground and ready. But just because you can do something legally doesn't always mean you should do something legally. That's something I certainly learned as a federal prosecutor. And when you've got a governor and a mayor saying, please stay out, you're only going to escalate the tensions here in our community. You can't help but wonder if that is not part of this show of force and effort to raise this issue in the public's eye. And so I worry that they may end up doing more harm than good.
Yeah, that it's part of the calculus. Barbara, let me ask you about the reports of lawyers not being allowed inside the detention facilities to see their clients. Is that illegal?
Well, they can't be withheld without legal counsel forever. But if, it's a Sunday afternoon and they say this is not the right time, we don't have the personnel here, you don't have a right to see your lawyer on a 24/7 basis. Also, they haven't been charged with a crime, and so it isn't that things are occurring in violation of their right to counsel. But if they are to have immigration proceedings, they do have a right to a lawyer there. And so I think it's a matter of when, not if, they get a chance to see these lawyers.
Okay. Shaniqua, your reaction to what we're seeing, because Border Czar Tom Homan said he's afraid someone could lose their life due to the unrest in Los Angeles, whether an officer or a protester. But does bringing in federal law enforcement just escalate the situation?
Yeah, absolutely. And, something that I find really interesting about all of this is Republicans talk a lot about states' rights, I guess, except when they don't run the states. I mean, they have really defied the wishes of the governor there. And I think all they're looking for is a scene. They are going into LA and making it really tense. They want the protesters to react to them so that they can justify whatever reaction they have, no matter how over the top it is. I mean, we've seen this before when in Washington, D.C. in 2020, when protesters were simply trying to bring attention to George Floyd's death. And, Donald Trump sent the National Guard out. And so he's trying to get a reaction out of them. But I think the thing that may backfire on him is that he's bringing more attention. More people are probably tuning into the news right now, and they're going to start to wonder what is going on. They're going to start to hear more that there are people who are being arrested, people who are being deported without any due process, and start to pay attention to what he's doing. And this is going to backfire on him. But I just hope it's in enough time that, he can be stopped.
Yeah. Let me just tell viewers what we're seeing to the left of your screen there, guys. This is a chopper view of Mariachi Plaza. That is in East Los Angeles, specifically Boyle Heights. It's about a 30-minute walk or so, maybe a little further, depending on the streets that you're going to take, to downtown, to where we had seen our colleague David Noriega amid a large presence of law enforcement there. So, Carlos, as we keep watching the scene here, Homan also said he has not ruled out asking the DOJ to prosecute Mayor Bass and Governor Newsom if they cross a line. That line has not been clearly defined yet. But how unprecedented would that be? And do you think there's any dereliction of duty happening by the California officials here?
Well, look, I think the administration itself and Mr. Homan have admitted that they have not violated any laws or been negligent in any way. That threat really isn't helpful in thinking about our institutions, the trust and confidence in our government. President Trump himself is someone who has complained against weaponizing the government to attack political adversaries. So it really wouldn't make sense. But what is clear here, Alex, is that this administration understands that any day where immigration is leading the news is a day where they are winning. This is an issue that the two parties had fought to a draw for a couple decades. During the Biden administration, Democrats lost the public's trust on this issue. President Trump knows it, and that is why he tries to raise the volume every time there's an immigration controversy in our country, because they believe, and the polls indicate, that it's to their advantage.
Well, Shaniqua, let me pick up on this because a new CBS poll conducted before the events of this weekend in L.A. found overall approval for Trump's deportation policy stands at about 54%. 42% say it is making people more safe. 30% say less safe. Do Democrats have to step carefully here? And will these numbers change if the federal response becomes more extreme?
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to change. I mean, Democrats have been, from the beginning of this, have started off pretty tepid. I think we're seeing a lot more people speak out, and that is because the public led them there. People were frustrated, upset, and not okay with what's happening. And, you know, that poll also showed a majority of people believe that non-citizens deserve due process, like any American citizen in this country. Undocumented immigrants are guaranteed that as well. So I don't think Democrats need to tiptoe around anything. I think Trump is really, you know, again, he's making a scene, and a lot of people are going to start to question what's going on, and they're not okay with this. We saw this with the Muslim bans in his first term and when he was separating families. He's just playing into what he always does, overstepping, and Americans are not going to like it.
Yeah, and picking up on that, Carlos, we have 63% of respondents who say a non-U.S. citizen should get a court hearing before they are deported. So what we've seen with the migrants being sent without due process to that prison, for example, in El Salvador, is that crossing a line? And do you think we will see a change in sentiment as all of this chaos plays out in the streets? Particularly, let's talk about independents who maybe heretofore had supported President Trump. Might they be vulnerable to change now and say, we don't like what we're seeing?
Well, of course, Alex, there is a breaking point somewhere. During the president's first administration, it was the child separation policy, right? When children were separated from their parents, they really did lose public support there. But a lot has changed since the first Trump administration. The Biden years really pushed the public to the right on this issue. And I think there's a high degree of tolerance for aggressive immigration enforcement. Of course, the administration knows that there is a risk in going too far. That's why Kilmar Abrego Garcia is back in the United States and will face charges here. And the administration is admitting that they denied his due process rights, made a mistake, were too aggressive, however people want to characterize it. So there is a line somewhere here. But as we can see from a lot of the polling, the public is willing to be very patient with the president and this administration. And the issue of immigration enforcement.
Barbara, before I let you go, can you quickly comment on Kilmar Abrego Garcia and the charges that are standing against him allegedly from the administration? Are they valid? Do you think they have a good case? Are they trying to re-engineer their own actions, sending him to El Salvador?
Yeah, I think first there are a couple of things that are clear. One is the Trump administration clearly had the power all along to bring him back to this country, even when they were told by the court to facilitate his return and they said they couldn't do it. I also think it's highly unlikely that Kilmar Abrego Garcia would have been charged with anything if he had not caused this embarrassment for the Trump administration. So clearly they dug and looked to see if they could find something. It appears that they did. I mean, a grand jury has returned an indictment that's a finding of probable cause of some serious charges for harboring and transporting undocumented immigrants. If those charges can be proved, then he will be convicted and be punished consequently. But I do think one thing that's important here is that he will get due process in court. He has a right to be a presumption of innocence. He'll have a lawyer. He'll have a judge. And so instead of just telling us he's a bad guy from the podium, now they've got to be put to their proofs. And so I think it's a good day for due process.